talking.
So I'll be here till 7 o'clock and my wife will be spewing that I'm not helping put the kids to bed.
No, exactly. No, hit record.
We're on.
We're on. To answer your question, to give a bit of background, we've already been probably talking for like 5 minutes. And I was like, should we just click a button before we just keep talking, have nothing actually recorded? You asked me about if I prefer doing the solo or the interviewing kind of podcasts. I prefer solo because I don't know, it's just I feel less pressure on how to keep it going, whereas with solo I can just rant and keep going, but then I run out of ideas. I don't know, I feel like I wedge in a few interview type ones to break it up so I don't run out of stuff to talk about.
Do you like how do you come up with your own? Are you just jotting notes down throughout the week? Like, this happened at Harvey Norman today. Like, he's good looking, but only at Harvey Norman. And then you'll just sit down and go, all right, like, do you do any planning in terms of like, all right, I'm going to make this funny, or do you just start talking and go, all right, we'll see where it goes?
It's a bit of both. So I will jot down things throughout the week. If there's certain things that feel a bit more bit-like, sometimes, not all the time, I'll write down what I think is funny about that. But then usually I only have about 5 things, if that, written down in my like notes app. And then I'll end up talking for 50 minutes. So
is that some of them 50 minutes? I listened to one where I went to it with a strut. I'm like, I'm going to get a compliment in this episode. And I heard, and it was a compliment with like a tinge of, all right, I need some filler.
Oh, probably. Honest. I mean, that probably wasn't even the intention. I literally just walking.
So it was funny. I enjoyed it.
I need to give Tyson a compliment at some point. This is the time to do it.
Yeah, that was good. That was a couple of days after that. Was it Coburg we're at?
Yeah, like the lawn bowls gig.
Oh man, it was so funny. I loved having the threat over your head that I'd tell Paul you said he looked 83.
Yeah. Have you told him?
No, I'm not that close. I'm not close enough to him to tell him that joke. I'd be too scared.
He'll get the Coburg boys onto you.
For sure. I mean, and they're more dangerous than the Point Lonnie boys.
I was nervous about that gig because everyone was a lot older than me. So I was like, how am I going to relate to any of these people?
It was a weird gig, hey. Like, I always find I'm doing so this weekend we've got do you know Ev Hocking?
Yeah.
Dave Thornton?
Yeah.
Those two are coming to Ocean Grove. We're doing a gig at a yoga studio called so it sold out way more than we were anticipating. So we thought the yoga studio might seat like maybe 60 or whatever. And then I spoke to the chick who owns, so she's got a cafe called Two Doors Down, and next door to Two Doors Down, she has 0 Point Yoga. And so we're just going to deck out this yoga studio. But dude, I don't know what she's doing, but she messaged me yesterday. She's like, yeah, man, like we nearly sold 80 tickets. I'm thinking we have to put it outside. But I say that only to say it's going to be such a weird environment because I reckon like that Bowls Club gig, it's going to be a real yoga studio vibe. Do you know what I mean? So it's so random the people you get up in front of. That Bowls Club night was weird. Hey, like it was weird. I was thinking the same thing as you. I walked in and I was like, oh man, like all of my material was getting edited.
I thought it was
like an absolute. You were dressed as an absolute glamour, like you were ready to go out in the town. And I've never seen so many 84-year-old blokes' eyes light up when you hit the stage.
Oh God, I know. It was when I arrived. I forgot. Do what happened? I had another gig in like Fitzroy or some shit, and I had dressed up because I felt like dressing up. And then I realized on the way to the second gig, I thought, oh, this is going to be just a bunch of old people in Coburg, isn't it? I'm like, I'm not looking appropriate for this, but it was good. The gig ends up being really fun.
That's what I love about it. It's so wild. Speaking of random gigs, like the other day, Billy Stiles messaged me on I think it was maybe a Friday or a Saturday, and he's like, "What are you doing tomorrow?" I was like, "Man, no, nothing. What are you doing?" He's like, "I got a gig in Torquay." He goes, "You should come." And so I agreed. I'm like, "I'm there." And he messaged me. He's like, "Just so you know, it's at a lounge room for a guy's 50th."
Oh my gosh!
And
Did we tell you that once you'd started driving?
Yeah, we rocked up at this, and actually, thank God it worked well. The guy's name was David Finger, and so like me and Billy, I think our whole we didn't do material. It was just like when your name's David Finger, it's like there's a set.
Finger, yeah.
But he said to me, he's like, man, I can go to this gig with a mate and just absolutely eat shit and feel fine about it because we're in it together. We can just go home, we can talk about it, we can laugh. It's always a memory. And
Yeah,
as
yeah.
soon as I saw you at the gig that night, I was like, all right, whatever. Like this is just it's just going to be it's something to talk about at the very least.
Interesting how like certain gigs, if there's certain people at the gig, it feels like a safe space for you.
For sure.
It's when you do certain gigs and you're like, "Oh, I don't know how this gig's gonna go, or this is shit, or whatever." And then there might be one or two people who you like or get along with, and you're there, you're like, "Oh, this night's so much better now."
Yeah. So like yeah, it's like the I saw your I feel like that Asian dude on your Instagram story at some gigs who want to play badminton with his friends. It's
Oh,
actually so for anyone listening, it's just a video of a guy and he's like what is he? He's mid-50s, probably 60, and
why
he's
do you want
standing
to make me emotional? Where
That's me at every gig where I don't rock up with a mate. I just stand in the corner. I'm like, all right, where's my crew? Yeah, it's just a guy standing there with his badminton racket. He's 60 years old, and his daughter has posted something saying, "Oh, my dad's first night at his new badminton club."
I to ask anyone to play. See, you've told I'm gonna have to turn up to every gig you do now because I'm
I
gonna.
mean, I'd appreciate it.
Man, it's man, those kind of videos really just I don't it's as soon as certain videos have like an instrumental music track with like strings underneath it, I started tearing up. Now I'm gonna be tearing up every time I see your face on a gig poster.
Yeah, that's right. Just think of a little Asian dude with his badminton racket. I reckon if you came to every gig that I did for comedy, you would lose interest in comedy real quick because the average audience attendance is 4.
Yeah. Have you gigged at all this year?
Yeah, yeah. What have I done? I've done maybe 5 or 6,
Oh, that's good.
5 or 6 gigs. What did I do? I did last Sunday. Have you ever done the Geelong open mic?
No. Oh, not Blazers one.
Yeah, come up here one day. You should. You haven't done many of the Fridays either, have you?
And one. I'm doing one again in a few weeks.
Sweet. Let me know. Let me know. I'll make sure I come in. But
Yeah.
so he's got the Friday night gig, which is awesome. But last Sunday we did the open mic gig, which he would tell you is usually it's just like trialing jokes naturally. Like there's usually comics. The other night, last Sunday, it was I don't know what happened, but it was electric. The whole room was just on fire. So you've got a couple of options there, but it's a bit of a hike. I did that one. I did Footloose a couple of times.
Never.
Where
Yeah.
you just go to humble yourself, and then that lounge room gig was on the last day of last year. Yeah, have you been doing much the last couple of weeks?
I've done nothing this year.
It's a weird time of year. Hey, I always find it. What are we like the 16th of Jan? I remember last year I got back into it on like the 14th of Jan, and I kind of like that.
Yeah,
Couple of
it's
week
like it's
block.
not even start yet. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. It's
But
kind
the Geelong gig is one of the I've only done it once and it's already a lot better than a lot of the other gigs that exist.
for sure. Yeah, when you get Geelong, when it's on, like some nights you'll rock up and you're like, oh man, it's so on tonight. Like the crew,
Yeah.
because you need 40. We did the Geelong Comedy Festival there. Me and Stevie Brayshaw. Is it Stevie Bradshaw? Brayshaw.
Bradshaw.
I should know that based on the fact we were working together for like 3 months trying to sell it. But it was 2 nights and you get 40 people in the room and you go, man, that's electric. Like it's awesome. So if you get 40 in there, yeah, it's just a rocking and rolling night. Whereas you know what I mean? You get some rooms with 40 and it feels a little empty. I saw you going to Perth though. I saw your other post today saying you're heading to Perth for some.
Yeah, I'm gonna go to Perth. Largely because of you, because said to me, "Oh, I'll go do the comedy lounge in
Oh,
Perth."
yeah.
So I'm gonna do that, and I'm doing it the 6th to the 9th of February. And wait, it was you, yeah? You've done it.
I've done it. Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
That's probably why I messaged you. Yeah, so I'm gonna go do that during Perth Fringe Festival, suss out Fringe Festival, suss out Comedy Lounge. I was gonna go for a week or longer, but I was like, man, what if I go and I hate this place, and then you're just stuck there?
Surely you'll love Perth.
You reckon?
I reckon. I don't know what you're into. I don't like February. Do you get down? Are you interested in the beach and stuff? Do you get down to the?
I want to go to the beach.
Okay. I'll speak to you before we go. Like, have you never been to Perth?
Never.
So I lived there for 6 years or so. The Perth coast is unbelievable. I went so I used to live there, and I thought, oh, it's nice. Like you see the water every day, and you go, it looks pretty good.
Yeah.
But after spending, man, I was 13 when I moved back from there. So after spending like 15 or 16 years away. I got back to Perth. I went for a run along the coast. You started at a place called Hillary's. Run about 3K up. Man, it's unbelievable. It's if you get a couple of good days there in terms of weather,
Yeah.
you won't want to come home. You won't want to come home. I'm gonna put up a post just
Like
going. I
Friday,
feel so.
I'm there Friday, like Thursday all day, like from 10 a.m. Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And I was like, that's enough days for a place that I'm not sure if I'm going to like it or not.
Have
So
you
I
got
was
mates there at all?
like, huh?
Have you got mates there at all?
Like Andrew Wolf and like a
Oh,
couple of the comedians. But I find whenever I go do gigs interstate, these people have lives. And
yeah.
I rock up and I'm like, oh, I'm in Sydney. I'm in Perth. They're like, I've got to go to work, man. Like, I've got my kids this weekend or something. So
Did you speak to Big Johnny? Was it John that you got your
yeah,
booking through?
he's the one that booked me.
Man, I reckon heaps of people say this. I don't know if I'm just saying it because I actually believe it or it's just been plugged into my brain and so now I've just bought into it. But I reckon I did Sydney for the first time late last year and I've done Perth. I reckon like from gigs that I've ever done, that Perth room was unbelievable. Apparently Johnny, he travelled, I don't know if this is true either,
Yeah,
just
I've heard this. Yeah.
he just travelled around the world looking at the best comedy rooms and designed his off that.
Yeah, that's what I heard as well. And everyone who I know from Melbourne who's been there, even the people who are in Perth or from wherever, everyone's come back and said good things. You know, when people come back from venues like, it wasn't that good, or, oh, I bombed, or this. I've never really heard that from Comedy Lounge. I've just heard people come back and say they had the best time.
For sure. And the good thing is, like, you've got 5 spots over the course of a weekend. So I think they've got 2 Friday, 2 Saturday. And then when you get there, they always tell you they've got like a 6 p.m. show. And if you want to do it, you can do it. And
Yeah, I'm doing. Yeah, I think I'm doing about five spots or something. And then he's got another venue in Fremantle. I don't know what it is. I'm doing that one as well.
man, I was talking to Jeremy Dooley the other day. I've never done Freo before, but I've seen photos. He reckons it's in terms of numbers, it's amazing, but just loose. It's just like a looser version of the Comics Lounge or the Comedy Store or whatever it's called. Again, the name's muddled up, but
Yeah.
you're going to
They're
be
all variations of each other in terms of names. That's why it gets confusing.
yeah,
Because you
I
have
know.
Lounge, Comedy Store.
Yeah. I can never keep up. I don't even know what the one in Melbourne's called anymore. I've stopped trying to figure it out.
Merch.
That's awesome, man. That's exciting. Okay, how long have you been going for now in the comedy world?
I started in 2022, so I'll be going on 3 years. Yeah, I'll be going 3 years this year.
Was your first gig? Was Gorilla your first gig? I remember.
Gig. Yeah,
Yeah,
I met you at my
yeah,
second gig.
that's right. That's right. A rock and roll chick was in town. Yeah, what a transition, huh?
Yeah.
So good, man. Are you like how do you find the ride in the comedy world? Are you do you ever miss like I just finished reading Keith Richards' autobiography
Yeah.
and man, like I've invested no time in music skills or whatever. I've got a guitar down here that I play from
Yeah.
time to time. Very like that was my New Year's resolution. Just play
That's an ornament in your house. Yeah.
say that again.
That's an ornament in your house.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Not for my wife, but for me it's
Yeah.
an ornament. But
It's just in the way.
yeah, but I look at stories of Keith Richards and I see him play. I saw your story you put up a while ago of you just was it a bass guitar you were just rocking?
Probably. Probably. Yeah.
I don't get it's like
I know what video you're talking
yeah,
about. Yeah, I'm playing bass.
I can't get over the way that people's fingers move. Have you heard of Billy Strings?
Yeah. I've got it. I follow him on Instagram.
He's
Yeah.
another guy that I watch. I go, oh my gosh, there's so many levels to this game. Because
Yeah.
I'm gonna like when I say it's an ornament to me, I'll pick it up and I go, okay, I think that's G.
Yeah.
You know, that's the level that I'm at right now. And then 14 seconds later, I've made my fingers across to C. And then I saw you playing that bass guitar, and I was like, okay, yeah, like we're just in a different world. Because you were full time rock and roll chick for
I
a few
was,
years.
for quite a few years. It was very fun and a lot more fun than comedy, and I miss it.
Really?
Yeah, it
Why
was a classic, but I miss it.
why is it more fun than comedy? Do you reckon?
Oh man. Well, for a start, I find the people in. It's funny because when I was doing music, a lot of the people I'd be around, I'd be like, oh man, this person's a drainer, or this person's this, or this person's annoying. Music people are way better than comedy people. Like, so much easier to have a fun conversation with, so much easier to have a night out with. Music people have nights out, and they're nights out. And then I'll be out with a few comedy people, and it reminds me of like the year 6 disco. And everyone's like really trying to show me how much they're partying. And I'm like, you guys are I've seen proper partying, and this isn't it. And everyone thinks that like everyone will have a few proseccos and think they're looser than what they are. And it's like, all right, relax. The venues we're at look a lot cooler in terms for music. I also find one thing when you're touring with comedy, not that I've toured, but I've gone elsewhere and done comedy, it's just you and you're just by yourself. Whereas in music, if you're touring, I hated like some of the other people I've been in bands with, but you're in different places, you're out and you'll have fun and it's just such a different experience. Like you're not alone. Whereas I would wake up in Sydney for a gig and I'm just like, well, it's just me now. And I might not speak to anyone for a whole day. Whereas in the band, yeah, you might not necessarily like your singer or whoever, but as a collective, you'd be like, what do you want to do today, guys? Oh, should we check out this place? Oh, should we check out that? And it's just like hanging out and it's just way more fun.
It's a weird feeling. Hey, that's a recipe for disaster for me. I know exactly what you're talking about. Like when you wake up and you spend the whole day by yourself, I'll go to the gym and the PT there will have a chat, say hello to me, and I'll struggle to string a sentence together because my mouth's just not ready for talking. It's just like the idea of doing that and then going out and trying to tell jokes is a weird balance. I try not to get too much in my head about it though, because I don't know what you're like, but I can feel flat or feel tired or whatever in the lead up. And for ages I was like, oh crap, I'm going to have a rubbish gig. But there seems no correlation with me between how I feel in terms of energy and how I actually perform. As long as like 12 seconds before I get up on stage, I'm slightly excited. Yeah. I'm like, all right, like I give myself a little bit of a chance.
I've never seen you flat on stage. I've always seen you perked up with energy.
Well, I feel like it's funny you say it because I reckon I'm the easiest person to compliment even after I bomb. Because people can just go, oh, you had, like, whenever someone says, oh, like, yeah, really good stage presence or good energy, I'm like, okay, yeah, that's how it felt. Like, it felt like I just ate shit for 10 minutes, but I managed to hold energy together.
I find with comedy, and again, comedy versus music, the adrenaline rush I have had from music before, comedy has never done that. And people say, oh, the rush you get from everyone laughing. Oh, and people tell you all this. I'm like, yeah. It doesn't compare though. And because I've experienced the difference, I've had some comedy gigs where I've come off stage and I've had that adrenaline rush or whatever the feeling, but it still has never come quite close. And that's not a thing of, oh, what I want to do more of. It's just in that moment, it's just different.
Man, yeah. I saw a video of the Rolling Stones the other day and Lady Gaga came out on stage.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen it. I can't remember the name of it. And she was going nuts. It was amazing. Like I'll send you the link after. It's
send it.
Unbelievable. And she
like Metallica and stuff as well.
Yeah, I wonder if I could show you on here. I haven't done this before. Let me try. I'll see if I can share this with you. Because man, like she just it's just wild. You look at the audience face and you go, okay, like there's something different going on here with this particular energy. Yes, it's weird as well. Like I often wonder how much of it's got to do with the fact that you're on stage for a while. Like you can sort of work your way into it. Wait, tell me if this comes up. I don't know if I'm.
Does it come up?
You see it? Oh, that's cool.
Imagine being there.
Is that even working? I don't know.
See, imagine being it worked. Oh. Imagine being there. That would be awesome. It's
At
just
the
it's
end,
just so much more fun, man. Like, and also don't forget with music, you've probably heard the songs before. You can sing along to it. Fireworks go off. There's lighting. There's cool outfits. Sometimes you might hear a song and then they'll do some random thing during it. There's just so much different things.
do you reckon, like, you ever gone back in the music world, or do you reckon is comedy walked out for a while now?
Um, it's tricky because I'd like to do both, but separately. I wouldn't do musical comedy. I don't
Okay.
enjoy that. Like, and I've had people say to me, "Oh, you need to incorporate your bass playing or your guitar playing into your comedy set." I'm like, no, because what I get from comedy and what I enjoy about comedy is very different to what I get from music and what I enjoy about music. So to combine the two steals the enjoyment from both because I'm not enjoying each one in the way I like to enjoy them. So in terms of whether or not I would do music again, I want to, and sometimes I fill in for bands. I don't think I would join a band again or start a band. I would ideally write and put out my own music and then get musicians to like jump on for gigs and that. But I don't have time to do it. So
Yeah, I know what you mean. That is the coolest part. Like Rolling Stones, as I said, are fresh on my mind because of the Keith Richards book. But even reading through that, I didn't realize there was a time, I think it was in the 70s, where they didn't tour together for 7 years because they were going through a whole heap of beef about
yeah,
who owned what songs, and Mick Jagger was going to do his own thing. And then, Mick Jagger went out for 7 years, did his own thing. And then after a couple, Keith was like, oh, man, I'm just going to go do my own thing then. And
yeah.
it's funny to see, like, I don't know if you like Bob Dylan. Like, I don't know why, but I love these old school kind of dudes, which might not be a surprise to you at all. But Bob Dylan, you look back at his career and you're like, it's a 60-year career, and it seems to have taken so many different turns. Like, I mean, in the 60s when he was singing, it was just a different world back then, you know?
Well, I guess it's like comedy. Imagine just telling the one joke all the time. Like you'd want to experiment with new things and evolve and do different things and I think with music, because music, you always hear different types of genres or new musicians who come out, or you'll find a different way to play something, or you'll hear something that someone else has done and be like, oh, I want to create something similar to that. So I think that's why there's a lot of musicians evolve a lot.
Yeah, that's it. Keith Richards was saying that because I'm like, how do you play the same songs for 60 years? Like, that just sounds like a nightmare. I've got jokes that are 6 months old. I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm ready to put that on the shelf. And he's like, no, no, but every time you get up there, it's not, it's like never the same. It's never the same experience. Exactly what you said. He's like, I'm always trialing, playing with new things. Yeah, it's amazing how deep the level goes. Hey,
I
like, there's
also find like because when I toured, say if I did like 20 gigs in a row, you'd think you'd get sick of the songs. And sometimes I'd get sick of it, but it would be this element of those songs became so automatic to me that even I wasn't even thinking about the song anymore. I was just thinking about the experience and oh, I'm on a different stage from yesterday. I'm in a different country. I'm in a different place. So rather than fixating on, oh, I've played this pattern of songs yesterday and day before, it becomes more about being in the moment. And I find in music, while I'm on stage, the interaction with the audience and how it feels, there's a lot of osmosis going on. And it doesn't feel like, oh, I'm here, I'm doing the music, and you're the audience. It feels like you guys are both creating an atmosphere together. Whereas in comedy, I feel there's more of a separate, most gigs, unless the gig is like fucking on fire, often it feels like here is the comedian and over there is the audience. And I need to think about what you guys are going to like, and I'm going to have to find a way to connect with you guys. Whereas in music, it feels like you're all existing together.
yeah. I don't know if you found this. Like, it sounds like with your music, you're at like a pretty cool level where you'd get to a place and people would recognize
Yeah,
your song. So like that barrier of expectations already been solved because you get there and they're like, okay, we like these guys, let's have fun. Whereas
yeah,
with comedy, unless you're like a Nate Bargatze or some big hitter, a lot of the time you get into a venues and they're like, all right, come on, funny guy. Like, what do you get? Show us what you got.
yeah,
You gotta try and
yeah.
earn trust a
That,
little
that's
bit.
exactly it. They don't trust you yet with comedy. And I think that's a hard thing because I've seen a lot of comedy gigs where the comedian might be someone who's bigger online, but their comedy isn't that great. And then they've walked on stage and then the audience go, oh, it's this guy. And they're laughing at, or this girl or this whatever. And the audience is automatically laughing at them just because it's that person.
Yeah.
Or like, actually, not even that. It's like the other way of that. Bill Burr, I can't remember which gig it was, the Red Rocks one or something. Bill Burr walks on, and for like 5 minutes, everyone's like screaming. He couldn't get a word out. He was like, all right, shut up. He'd be like, hey guys, and everyone's laughing already. There's all that thing. They already trust you.
Yeah, man, I'm like that with Nate Bargatze. Like do you know him?
Nah.
So, yeah, he's such a gun. I don't even know how you explain him. He's just like he just plays the family. He's like a dorky kind of dad.
Yeah.
And just, oh man, he's so good. He's completely clean as well, which is, I mean, to be honest, I reckon whether you're clean or dirty, it's still so hard to. My wife's always like, yeah, it's like I respect that because it's way harder to get a laugh when you're being clean. I'm like, man, like even dropping an F-bomb, it's still pretty hard to get a laugh. You know what I mean? Like it's not going to make that much of a difference. But this guy, it's just so funny how the audience scope that he has. It's so broad based on the fact that like you can play him with your kids in your room. And I went to his gig in Oregon a few years ago when I was in the States. And man, we're at like an outdoor theater. It was 2,000 seats. There was 8-year-olds there. There's 23-year-olds there. And everyone was pissing themselves. Like everyone thought it was hilarious.
Yeah.
I'm like, man, I reckon there's about 1.5 jokes that I have that an 8-year-old's going to find funny. And the rest of it's just like, yeah, you probably should say that when they're in bed.
You'll have to send me a video because I'm curious what these jokes were. Like the fact they translated to such a wide audience.
I'll send you. I'm like so tempted to try and say a couple, but I've butchered too many good jokes in my time to put people off him. So I'll send you a couple of links. Why did you come across to the comedy scene?
I always wanted to do comedy. Like this is gonna sound so fucking lame. I'm gonna say, but when I was a kid, I used to watch a lot of Seinfeld. I obviously didn't understand a lot of it, but I just watched it and I'd enjoy it. And in like grade 1 or prep, at recess, I started doing stand-up comedy to like the other kids, and then kids would actually come. The other people would come watch it. It was like, all right, it's recess. She has a stand-up show, and I would like write actual material for it on like little sticky notes. Like progressively, the audience dropped off. They lost interest.
Yeah,
Like, it was an actual thing that I was doing. And then I decided from around that age that I wanted to write for TV and write shows and films, and just started writing all these different ideas. And then obviously throughout school, I studied screenwriting because it's just always what I wanted to do. Studied screenwriting, went to uni for screenwriting, worked in screenwriting, and then obviously I never knew how to get into music, into comedy, because I was like, how do you just do comedy? Whereas music, it's like, another person who plays the guitar or another person who plays the drums, you make a band, and then they might have a band, they might know someone who's on, similar to comedy, and then you fall into the whole music scene of people that you know. Whereas I didn't know anyone else who did comedy. I didn't know how it worked or what gigs there were. And then eventually, music stopped, and I applied the same mindset where I thought, well, with music, there was a Melbourne musicians network or Melbourne's musicians page on Facebook. So I was like, surely there'd be one for comedy. So I just typed up Melbourne comedy page or network, and then, or hub, and then that page came up, and then there was an open mic, and I was like, right, this is my chance to actually start doing comedy. Put myself on the open mic, did that gig, and then somehow someone I know or knew also was doing comedy, but I don't think he does it anymore. And he told me about Sharplin's gig. I then did Sharplin's gig because of that. Met you, met Chapani. Chapani used to run a gig, and then it just kept going from there, where someone would see me at a gig and then say, oh, come do this one, come do that one. And then suddenly you're in the comedy scene.
Yeah, it's funny how it works. Well, you was that COVID that hit pause on the music?
Nah, it was working with very difficult people.
Oh.
That hit pause. No, we had this singer, and I don't know, man. She went nuts, like as most singers do. And then if she ever listens to this, which I doubt, she'll probably might sue me because she tried to sue the drummer at one point before. But like it was a rock band, and then she's like, I don't want to do rock music, I want to do pop music. And we're like, that's fine, that's all good. Then she wanted to do salsa music and Spanish music. I'm like, well, that's not what we're doing. And then she just didn't rehearse any of the songs for a tour, and then she was being difficult, and then it was just all these unnecessary dramas that eventually management and whoever kicked her out, and because it wasn't going to work. And then the band kind of got reshuffled to merge with another band, and then the drummer became like so driven by spite for that original singer that I then found her difficult to work with. I'm still friends with her now though, but at the time I then started finding her difficult to work with. And then I was like, you know what, this has run its course, I'm gonna tap out now, unfortunately. So yeah, and then COVID happened the following year. So
Yeah. Yeah. What is it with lead singers? I feel like I've heard that so many times. That
yeah,
there's a little bit of like in the wild world that is music, the real leaders in that wildness seems
yeah.
to be the lead singers. Like
My
what?
brother is in a band, very, very new band. Like they're just doing local gigs. They've made $9 worth of royalties. They recently had to part way with the singer because he was never available. Um, he was never available. He didn't like the songs the boys were making. He didn't like this. He didn't like that. Everything was an issue. So then they were like, "Look, let's part ways." He's like, "Oh, I don't want to quit." And then they said, "It's not working," and essentially had to fire him, even though he said he wanted to leave at one point. It's like they called his bluff and he didn't like that. He's now suing them. And they're like, yeah, sure, you can have your $9. So it's just wild. Singers, they're interesting people.
It's very interesting. Man, any band that stays together for a long time, I've got respect for because I mean the
Yeah,
discipline of just writing jokes or just trying to get good at like comedy for yourself can be
yeah,
hard. Let alone coordinating times, coordinating like dealing with
yeah.
what you just said, like different music tastes and different desires for different
Does
times.
everything.
How do you
That's
even, yeah, how do you even start that? Like do you have a bit of a like a weekly schedule where you go, all right, like when we get to a certain level? Or,
it
yeah,
just kind of like, well, that's a big reason why I started doing comedy, because I liked that I had to depend on me. If something went bad, it was my fault. Something if I wasn't doing gigs, it's because of me. If I am doing gigs, it's because everything is for good or for bad, it's I'm responsible. Whereas music, you could have the most best strategic idea and be like, this is the way something needs to be done, and have evidence and know why it needs to be done this way. But then the other person can just be like, no, I don't want to do it that way. And then you're having to fight all these obstacles that you shouldn't have to fight. In terms of how you plan things, it's kind of, you might choose to rehearse every Tuesday, or you might choose, oh, we've got a gig coming up, so we'll rehearse the next 2 weeks leading up to that gig. You kind of with bands, it's always an ever evolving conversation. Like there's never necessarily things set, and because you're booking things so far in advance, you know what's coming up. So then your conversations are always happening ahead of time. So it's not like, hey, what should we do this week, guys? You'll already know what you're doing that week because whatever you needed to do would have been planned 3 months prior.
yeah. So man, you guys are touring Europe.
Yeah.
That's so wild. So what kind of that's like it's a different level to the game, huh? Like
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
you're obviously so from that stage. What does music world look like? Were you sort of when you're in the midst of it, like when you were having those good days and everyone was just gelling and things were good? Like
Yeah. So,
it would
so
have
it's
been pretty sad.
so I'll explain like Melbourne to then there. So Melbourne, if you're gigging in Australia, it's kind of like comedy. The main industry don't care about upcoming bands unless they fit a certain type of stereotype or thing that they want to push. So it's sort of almost right. If you want to do well as an Australian band, you have to get overseas. if you're then it's obviously up to whether or not you're a good band or not. Because anyone can book some flights overseas, but whether or not there's a market for your band or your music will decide how well you do. Ideally, you'll end up on festivals over there. So for me, I can only speak for Europe and and UK. We ended up on festivals, and their festivals are more extensive than they have here. Like they'll have members of Iron Maiden or Blue Oyster Cult or like Deep Purple. Like these are, I would do a festival. Maybe we were early in the lineup, sure, sometimes, but like that same lineup at the top of the poster had Blue Oyster Cult.
Dude,
So it's pretty cool.
that's wild.
They look after their artists a lot more over there. I found whether you were the shit kicker band on the lineup or the headliner, you were given, in terms of festivals, you were given a dressing room, you were fed, you were given like escorts around. Obviously, the headliner probably had maybe slightly better food than us, but overall, you were treated as an equal and as if you were worth to be on that lineup. Whereas I've done festivals here where you're just treated like shit. Like you're treated as if you're an inconvenience for even being there. So it's like, why are you even doing this thing?
Yeah.
The culture of audiences is very different. People that go, like for example, in Australia, a lot of the festivals, I don't know if it's still the case, but when I used to go to Soundwave and Big Day Out, it was like designated drinking areas. Over there, you can drink anywhere in the festival.
Yeah.
But people were more responsible about it. Like there were people that would have like lawn chairs if they wanted to sit further back. There'd be people right up front with beers. It was just such a different vibe, and it was just a very different atmosphere. And it was really cool.
Yeah, Australians, it's weird how different we are to what our international stereotype is. Everyone thinks of Aussies, or at least they did, thought of Aussies as like laid back, just go with the flow, just,
Yeah, no,
no stress. We're so the opposite. I feel
yeah,
like we're such a bunch of bitches. Like the fact that you can't have a
we're
beer.
all stress.
Say that again.
We're all stress.
It's so wild. It's like I think I saw that during COVID the last couple of years. I'm like, oh, like we're bitches. Like we are so soft.
Yeah, it's such a double-edged sword with a few things. Like with, I'll use the like the COVID thing's a whole other level, but in terms of the what's it called, the drinking at festivals, over there, I didn't see people get sloppy or aggressive or like it would happen, but not really. Whereas here, I was at Red Hot Chili Peppers. The gig hadn't even started. This guy was so drunk.
Oh no.
He was pissing on himself. He vomited in front of him. Someone else like hit someone and was getting escorted out. I'm like, the gig hasn't even started yet.
That's so wild.
Whereas these other people, they've been at this festival for 3 days in Scotland.
Yeah.
They've been going at it for 3 days and everyone's having a good time.
What
This
is that? That's weird. Yeah, I always think of I sort of thought when I was in the UK, we lived there for 18 months. I mean after 18 months you start to see a few differences, but I felt for a while that like the UK crew and the Aussie crew are fairly similar in some ways. So it's interesting just even with like a little insight to a festival setup how
yeah.
differently things are structured. I wonder what that is. But like would you say that there's a noticeable difference between playing in Australia, not just with like the management and the people who are booking you, but like actually being on stage in Australia, being versus being on stage in Europe, or not really?
Way more fun in Europe. There's a lot more of a respect for someone who is up on stage. A lot more people would buy merch and buy albums, and there was almost a degree. Look, we also had an illusion of being from overseas, so this might have contributed to it. But it was like people wanting to take photos and really there were actually this is a good example. People over there, obviously you can do this over there. They would follow from city to city to your gigs. That's not going to happen here. You're lucky if someone wants to even buy a CD here.
Yeah.
Like everyone's wanting a door spot. Over there, there were people who would have paid so much money coming to multiple gigs and then would bring us gifts. I never saw anything like that here.
Man, I can't even imagine someone bringing a gift to one of my gigs.
No, but it even feels like that with comedy. Like a few of the people who've gone and done comedy overseas, they're doing paid gigs. Here, a lot of the gigs aren't that.
Yeah, I don't know if this is an Australian thing or if this is just a comedy thing, but it is weird the power trip I reckon that comes with running a certain room, like just having people ask you for like I don't know if you notice this, but even the open mic scene sometimes majority like honestly, and I'm not just saying this, I would say majority of the people that I speak to are really good, but I've had a couple of moments where I'm like, oh, you love the fact that I'm asking you.
Yeah.
Like there's and even, I don't care if you're like a big comedy room runner or if you're like I'll talk to you. I'll talk to you if you're on the street, if you run a big room. I don't care. But the idea that like I can come to you and ask for a spot or like that you may be a bit standoffish because I might watch something. I don't know. I just find it really awkward. Like
Yeah. Relax. That's
just
why that's actually that there is the reason I started doing the podcast. That exact thing. I got over this whole thing of some person who also does comedy who has just like spoken to a venue and started running a night. You're going to decide whether or not I'm going to do a gig, whether I'm worthy to do your room where you're not going to pay me. You're probably going to pull in 10 people and you're just going to ask people, so are you two fucking? What's your job? Like, you're going to decide my fate here.
yeah.
That's why I started the podcast, because I was like, I need something else I feel like I can have control of in a way.
For sure, man. You should come up. We're going to do this Ocean Grove gig that we're doing this weekend. So Ev's like I'm MC, Ev's opening, Dave's next. I'm gonna like it's not locked in, but I'm gonna try and get Big Hughesy to come up to the second one if he's free.
Yeah.
You should come up and you should set the trend, like do the first 10 minutes or 15 minutes or whatever. Because it'd be so good. Like as we were saying, imagine how fun that would be. Like me and you,
Weekend.
hopefully Hughesy rocks up, cool audience, hopefully. Yeah, it's so much more fun. Like that. That's exactly why I started it. Like I wanted to start a gig for the same reason you just said. Because I'm like, man, like if I got to kiss your ass to try and get a gig, I'm not playing that game. That's why I really respect. I don't know him, but I really respect Luke Kidgel and just what he's done with his audiences. Like it's so cool to see this dude. He's like selling out theaters around the world just based off a following that he's built online. I'm like, man,
that is the
people are
best.
trying to cancel that.
That is the best position you can be in, whether it's music, comedy, whatever. Even the real world, like your job, and if you can exist in a way that is self-sufficient from everything else, that's the best. If you can get to a point where you've built an audience and you can book your own show or have family helping you book shows or people that you truly trust, that's the best. It's like all these comedians recently that they were signed to whoever the fuck, and they haven't been paid. They're not going to get paid for any of the festival runs they did last year because the manager's like gone insolvent or whatever.
Well, yeah, I saw Theo Von had a similar thing to that last year or a couple of years ago. I don't know if it was his manager or someone who was working pretty closely with him. Just took way more of the cash.
Well, this one was Australia, a whole heap of Aussie comedians.
Yeah, what was the story there? Was that like a
basically they were all signed to, I can't remember who the booking agent was. But obviously the booking agent helps you book the gigs, book the tour. You'll probably contribute to some costs, and then at the end of everything, like they help promote it and all this, and then you should get your cut or you should get paid. They basically just said, sorry, we can't afford to pay everyone now. You've essentially all done those shows for free. So that time off, all those people would have taken time off work, writing the show, all this, all that, none of them getting paid. And the irony in all that is I guarantee a lot of us looked at those comedians like, oh, fuck, they got signed to this booking agent. How could I get signed? Signing doesn't always get you the best result, clearly. So, yeah.
I don't know if you agree with this, but I reckon like the idea of being signed in Australia doesn't excite me at all. Like
Yeah.
I look at people who are signed and I go, okay, well, like this is a broad stroke of the brush. Like there'd be exceptions. But I feel like politically you have to lean a certain way. You have to be happy just to go along with like the idea of being slightly controversial and being represented by one of the big brands or one of the big management companies just isn't going to happen because it's like, all right,
we're not signed.
yeah. If you haven't got a blue streak in your hair, do you know what I mean? And you're not voting yes to everything you should vote yes for. You're not you're not getting a gig. And I'm like, man, I look at my history of Instagram posts. I'm like, no one would want to be like representing me because it's you know what I mean? Even though like maybe not in Australia, but in plenty of fields, there's a lot of people that are sort of, I mean, like you just look at the States at the moment, you see the big Trump's back in, you go, okay, clearly there's been a shift from what's like polite society and mainstream.
Quite interestingly, I think a big shift is coming in like the 18-year-olds, the 19, the 20-year-olds, because I work at a gym and a lot of them are like 20, 21, 19, and they're all so much more relaxed and just fun to be around. People my age group aren't fun to be around. They've all got issues. And
Yeah.
I have a theory of why this is. All the 18, 19, 20, they were all in school during like COVID, lockdowns and all this, during homeschooling. Schools didn't have time to push anything else. All they could push at that point is, right, maths, English, like what you need to know. Whereas when I was there was all these other like seasonings
Yeah.
to the education. So it wasn't just, this is what you guys need to know and what you'll need to know in life and to get by and go into the workforce or make money. But because they were all at home during that, they could literally only learn the core things. So I think that's why there's such a shift coming. And even in America, like the whole Trump thing, a lot of younger people I've spoken to who are like 22, who I thought would be devastated about Trump, they're all wrapped. So I think there's something there.
Yeah, it's cool. I've definitely noticed. I wish I could show you. My wife got me a shirt for Christmas, and it's like this gangster photo of Trump getting back to the White House, and just
Yeah.
at the bottom it says "Daddy's home." And I'm like, oh man, I'm so keen to like. I'm such a big talker on Instagram, but then she's like, "It'd just be a cool comedy shirt." I'm like, man, I'm doing my best to get laughs at the
Oh,
best of time. You know what I mean? You just talk about a good way to lose half the audience.
yeah, I know.
Uh,
Man, it's, I don't know, like I always ask people with the whole Trump thing, particularly the people who are like, fuck Trump, he's a fucking this, that. I've sworn a lot on this, by the way. Is this fine? Do
oh,
I
go
need to
for it.
read
Of
it?
course.
Yeah, and basically, I like to say, so what is it that you don't like about him? Same with people who love him, whatever the side is. I like to know what is your reasoning behind that. And a lot of people just can't give a reasoning for why they feel how they feel.
Yeah.
It's like, why do you feel this person's a better option, or why do you feel this person's bad? If you could give me your reason of why you genuinely believe that, sweet. But a lot of people can't with a lot of things.
It's a good point, and it's amazing. Yeah, you're right. Like it's pretty cool to be able to sit down and have an honest conversation. I've got plenty of friends who can't stand the guy, but
Yeah,
the idea of actually sitting down and having an honest conversation about what it is you like, and actually trying to find like some points of agreement or trying to understand, like it's a way more interesting conversation. What
yeah,
like the reason I love him is part of the reason that so many people hate him, and at the moment I see him as like a little bit of a middle finger to the establishment, like
yeah,
whether that is big pharma. Man, we'll see. Like 4 years' time, we'll see if he sort of walks the talk. I think he will, but it's really interesting just to see him as a middle finger to that big
yeah,
pharma, big news. Um, just some of these big areas where money's just spoken far
yeah.
louder than truth for so long. It's gonna be a fun couple of years, that's for
It'll
sure.
be interesting. I noticed the big like smear campaign, I guess, is the whole he's gonna get rid of abortion. Whether or not you think it should be abolished or whether or not it should be a right, regardless of that, it shows how much people don't actually know because he isn't the decider of that. A lot of these matters actually sit state level. And the reason why they sit state level is because a lot of the states, a lot of people don't really move around in America. I've got a lot of family over there, and a lot of people where they ended up settling, like their great grandparents, their great great grandparents, is where they end up staying. And a lot of those regions, like let's say the South, where they might be against abortion or against certain things, those areas, they've grown up there, they're the beliefs that they have, and that's what they believe is right. So certain topics sit at state level because the populace of that community, that's what they agree with. Sort of like how different countries have different religions and
Yeah.
beliefs and laws and all that.
It's really noticeable, actually. So, like I mentioned before, that I was in Oregon in 2022, which
It's
is
everywhere, man. This every 2 seconds. So I lived over here.
yeah, man. I need to get back on that bandwagon. The last few years, I've been pretty put. Just yeah, it's hard traveling with little kids, obviously, but man, I can't wait. I mean, I'd be struggling to keep up with the amount of places that you've been to in the band, but I'll give it a fair shake. But it was, yeah, like Oregon. So my brother-in-law, wife's brother, lives in a place called Medford, and
Yep.
the whole region. You go there. We were there in the middle of COVID, essentially, when it was still hard to fly out of Australia or whatever. But you get there, and the whole conversation there was like, yeah, like fuck just taking a vaccine because we're told we have to. And I was like, wait, what? I can't believe you just said that out loud. I've been terrified to say that the last 2 years because in Australia you say that and you're in a whole heap of trouble.
Yeah.
But like the whole region, that is true. And then yeah, you're right. Like you go to Portland or you go to San Fran, or you kind of know what color state you're going to, whether it's blue
Yeah.
or red. I guess it's true to a degree. Like maybe for Melbourne, especially, like Melbourne is like a pretty woke or like so-called progressive city. You
Yeah.
know that, but the other cities as a whole feel like a little more mixed, huh?
Yeah, in Australia.
Yeah,
Yeah, I find Sydney to be very mixed. And it all comes down to just areas and stuff. It's like in Sydney, the Western Sydney have very different beliefs to what a lot of people in Melbourne have. But even like, yeah, Sydney's more diverse, but even still, everyone's a lot more relaxed than it is in Melbourne.
yeah. Melbourne is a tent city. I was wondering before when you were talking about having a big night out with comedians or a so-called big night out with comics, how much of that's like a Melbourne thing? Because
Oh,
it's kind of, I feel like it's hard for some people, especially in the you know public world, for lack of a better description, with comedy, to say what they really feel, because everyone's thinking about gigs and thinking about like where am I going to get put on, and I can't have the wrong opinion and whatever. And I just find those conversations so jarring because you're like, oh, I can't even be real with you right now in case like word
yeah.
gets out that yeah,
It's interesting because actually, I think you made me think of something that I didn't think of. Whereas where I've had some huge nights out with people from Sydney, and they've been so much more fun and proper, like big nights out. And I'm not saying like to do drugs or this. I've never done drugs or anything, but just the vibe of the night feels lively and fun and genuinely really large.
yeah.
Whereas it's not the same here. Like everyone will be sitting around a table having very medium chats, and then someone might fall off a chair. Wow, oh, you're wild. Oh, she's a wild one. I'm like, that's what it took.
Oh man, that's impressive. You haven't done drugs like the touring days. I thought it was just part and parcel of being a musician.
I've been around a lot of it. I've never done any. I have seen lines you would not believe. I've seen all the cocaine in Spain, and none of it's been in my nose.
Man, what was that decision? Like you made that like takes a element of like, all right, there's conviction in that.
I think a large part of it was the other girls in the band didn't as well. So
Huh.
that kind of, not that we had a thing of make sure you don't do this. Like if you want to do good, go do it. The guys we toured with, all of them would partake. But for me at that point, I was only 21, but I felt like I was so old. I was like, oh well, if I haven't done anything this whole time, why would I? That was my mindset with it. I was like, oh, I've never done it this whole time. Why would I now? And then I kind of liked the fact that I hadn't. And then that evolved from how it stands for me now. It's like I've had huge opportunities to really do it and do it well, and I didn't do it then. So why am I going to do it now in Australia? Like just on some night out on Chapel Street where I know from what I hear the coke is shit anyway.
Yeah, what is it? Cut with baby powder.
Yeah, it's like it's been cut with baby powder and like it's beat up someone's ass most likely. Like whereas I could have had the genuine thing and I didn't. And back then, I'm telling you, if we asked for it on our rider, they would have sorted it for us. That was the situation.
If you asked for it, where?
If we're in like certain locations, if we wanted it, it would be sorted.
Yeah, isn't
Sort
that?
of situation.
You can see how people go off the deep end. Hey, like you look at it, I mean, there's endless examples. Keith Richards again, Amy Winehouse. You
Yeah.
look at how people they dip their toes in the water of that scene. And
Also,
if you,
like you're out every single like comedy, you're out every night, but music, you are out every single night because the music gig ends a lot later. Everyone's buzzing after. It's a whole different vibe. Music, everyone looks cooler. We're all dressed cool. It's more theatrical. Everyone's hanging out after. You're around a lot of other people who look cool. There's some level of, as soon as someone's got a guitar or they're a singer, that adds to their attractiveness. There's a
oh,
whole
dude, for
star
sure.
thing around them. You don't really get that with comedy. And like everyone's out, the music gigs wrapped up at maybe 1, and then you're like, well, we're here now, we might as well have a drink. And if you're doing it in Australia, you're not gigging every day, it's the weekend, so you're like, fuck, that was sick, let's all have a drink or do whatever. If you're touring, you're doing it every night, so you're like, oh, well, I'm in Barcelona today, how could I not? Oh, I'm in Paris today, how could I not? And then another thing is a lot of fans will, again, I'm not at Keith Richards level, but like, because I would end up interacting with fans or other bands, and they would have a drink on the rider, so you'd end up having a drink, or someone would pass you a drink. Like certain venues, one venue we played had like dessert shots, so like shots that tasted like desserts. Man, I cleaned up the whole row of them. There was so many.
That's
Like,
delicious.
it's just, you're out and you're always somewhere new, and you're like, I need to enjoy this. But then also, we would also operate in a way of, we wouldn't get on it every single night because we were doing so many, and we're like, let's save it for when we know it's going to be good. Because there'd be certain cities or certain venues where like, this is going to be a good one. That's going to be a good one. So maybe we would try organize the next day as a day off or a shorter drive. But you can see how you slip into that, particularly if you're at an even bigger level where everything is even more readily accessible. Also, as your band gets bigger, the more lonely you get. And that's what I started finding, and that's when I started hating it.
Well, because you start to feel a little used by some people, like because you're Jacinta from that band, they're like they want to rub shoulders.
It's not really that surprising. Yes and no. It's, you become, so put it this way. When we first started touring around UK and Europe, budget is lower,
Yeah.
gig pay is less. So we would share our hotel rooms with each other, or maybe like 2 of us in this room, 2 of us in that room. Would have to share a van with another band to make it cost effective. So we're hanging out with these people. The venue is a big venue, might have a few hundred people there, but you're not exactly being carted off straight away after the venue. Like, you end up mingling with whoever's there. So there's that element. But as the band gets bigger, you can have your own bedroom now. Or it's like, you don't actually need to go talk to every fucking fan so they can buy merch or whatever. You could just hang out backstage the whole time and then leave. And as that happens, it becomes more and more lonely, and everyone becomes more siloed off from each other. You become more siloed off from others in the band and from the audience and all that, and it just gets more lonely. Like, my biggest gigs, like in the last year that I did some of the biggest gigs I ever did, stayed in the nicest hotels in like Switzerland, Austria, all this. Most depressed I had been in the whole time I was doing it.
It's funny how that works.
Yeah.
That's one thing that I like. If I go to a place, you want to be just thrown into the middle of a culture, not siloed off. You want to be just thrown in and just go about their daily life. Hey,
Yeah.
the idea of just staying in a fancy hotel is the equivalent to me of just going to every city. I know there's the exception of a few, but like there's so many cities you go to, and you're like, I may as well just be in Melbourne because it's like, oh, there's your H&M, there's your whatever, you know what it might be. So Whereas when you can just get out into like the random cafes that exist, it's pretty cool just rubbing shoulders with locals. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, and it's like I found with us, it was like the band was reaching certain points and no one could have a chat that wasn't about strategy or planning or this or that. Like the fun was gone and it was just all right, I've got my own hotel room now, but before like we would share a hotel room and we would be up till 6 a.m. just fucking chatting. Like, did you see this? Did you see that? And it would be the best. It was like, you know that when you'd have a sleepover with your mates when you're like 15? It was like that every day. It was even if you didn't like at times I fucking hated the singer. She fucking hated me. But we had some awesome times still. It was awesome.
That's cool. Have you guys got much stuff online?
Yeah, well, this is the thing. A lot of the stuff that's online, I'm not even on it because dramas ended up happening. So yeah, the band existed before I joined, and then it started getting bigger, and then I joined, and it kind of blew up overseas. And then we had recorded a whole new album, put all this new stuff out, and then a few years later, the band like collapsed, and all the stuff got taken offline.
Dude,
Yeah.
man, that sucks. Yeah, I was excited.
That's why I want to release my own stuff because I feel like I did all this stuff and I don't really have anything to show for it. It was also a very different time with social media because I look back at my Instagram from back then. I would be away for like 9 months touring and then I uploaded one photo at the end of the tour. Because back then, like 2016, 17 through to before COVID, there was no Instagram stories. And if you're uploading photos every day, it would be like, oh, you've got tickets on yourself, look at you. Whereas now, if you're someone who's traveling or doing something and you're posting, I'm in Paris today, I'm in Austria today, I'm fucking wherever today, people are like, oh, that's so cool. Or let's see another, oh, they're over here now, they're here. It's
Yeah.
such a different thing. So I feel like I've got nothing to show for all this awesome time I did. I hardly got anything. If I get dementia, all that's gone.
But part of the cool part is like even hearing back in the 60s with Bob Dylan stories. I mean, he's probably a bad example because there are some like rare footage of him at just random gigs as he's starting out. But yeah, there's plenty of cool stories from like the early 1900s with like your black blues dudes who all you get are the stories. Like you might have a random off cut of an attempt at a recording, but I
Yeah.
mean the stories that come out of it are still pretty cool. So I mean, if at nothing else, that's still a cool takeaway.
I saw a Ramon nearly get bashed by a bunch of bikies. I also saw him nearly try to beat up like the sound dude, like just the drum of the Ramones. Fair enough. Um, like I can't even think of any others right now, but just really random weird things.
That's so good. Yeah, I love it. I love it.
Oh, I used to have this huge crush on this like singer from a band called was it Queensryche or Y&T? I can't even remember which guy it is now. But I used to like have a huge thing for him and he was playing on the same lineup that I was playing. I was like, oh my God, so and so's here. Oh, and he was like that particular festival, like we all had rather than cabins, we all had like an area where it was just sectioned off. And it's like, this is for this band, this is for that band, this is for this band. All the catering was in the middle. So we'd all share the catering. And he was there. And I was like so excited to see him. But I forgot that 80s musicians looked hot in the 80s. We're talking 50 years ago, 40. He was just like some short little bald man. And I went up to him, I was like, oh my God, I've got the biggest crush on you. Because in my head, I always picture him as present day. He's like, oh, really? Really? I'm like, you before.
Did you say that?
I didn't say it like that, but in a roundabout way.
Oh, so good. I love it. Oh man. Oh, dude, I won't keep chewing your ear off because I can hear my wife and kids just got home and I'm going to get round up into cooking duties. But let's do this again because it's always fun.
Yeah. It's always good to see you. Always good to chat.
Right back at you. Yeah, sweet. All right, legend. We'll leave it there.
Catch you soon.
Hey, catch ya. Bye.